Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. This is the embossing folder that kind of started all of this. Now, this is from the KS Craft Lover store on Alley, and it's really gorgeous. It's quite intricate and there's kind of lots of fine lines and detail in this embossing folder. So when I was thinking about this, I kind of thought I would just have a bit of a play because I really love the design, but to be honest, I wasn't exactly sure what I would do with it. So I started off by using some kind of cheap and cheerful watercolor paper, and the sheet is 4¼ by 5½ inches that I put in there. And you can see the design here. It's kind of hard to see, and it's even harder to show you on camera, but if I kind of tilt it, you can see it. But I really wanted to get the look, the design that was like on the front of the embossing folder, so I thought I would have a wee play around. Now this is not a new technique, it's only new to me, and I hadn't tried it before at all. So I'm just taking my VersaFine Onyx Black ink pad, which is a pigment ink, and swiping it over the embossing. And this was kind of like a surprise to me. This is what I wanted, and it was kind of so instant just with a few swipes of the ink pad. So I thought I would try it out a little bit more. So I have some squeezed lemonade and some abandoned coral. These are just the Reinkers, but if you just have the ink pads, you could just put the ink down for the ink pads onto a non-stick mat and smush it in. But this is just what I'm doing since I have the Reinkers. I sprayed this little watercolor sheet of paper very heavily with water, and then I am literally just dabbing down the two colors. There is no science. I'm not good at this. It's just anybody under the sun can give this a go. And then once you kind of add the two colors together, you kind of get the third orangey color. So I'm going to dry that with my heat gun really thoroughly and then run it through my Cuttlebug in the embossing folder, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. So honestly, you don't have to be careful here. You can move in all directions. I did lots of these panels and they all came out gorgeous, so you really can't go too wrong. And don't worry about the sides yet. We will kind of fix that up later, but for now I'm just kind of playing. And the last one that I'm going to show you is Squeezed Lemonade and Mermaid Lagoon. Again, you don't have to use these inks at all. You could use watercolors. You could use sort of water-soluble crayons. You could use anything. Gelatos, anything that you have in your stash. And again, when I put down the blue, it's a little bit hard to move, so I squirt it with water a few times after I've put it down. And then, of course, if I mix the two together, I kind of get a nice green color, and that becomes the third color for the project. So as I said, there is no skill to this. It's just adding water and kind of making sure that I don't get mud, and then drying it with my heat gun really thoroughly. You could definitely let these dry naturally as well, but again, I am usually trying to hurry through. And so I have dried these all now. I'm going to pop this last one through the embossing folder, and then I thought I would try something just a little bit different and see how it went. I am trying this VersaFine ink. This is the Majestic Blue color, and it's just the wee 1 by 1 inch cube one that I have. That's all I have in them. And I'm going to swipe it over and see how this one works out. So this one works just as well as all of the others. Now, I didn't try anything other than these pigment inks, but you could definitely give any inks a go. I was really just having a play around, and when I started, it was like instant gratification because it looked so pretty once I had swiped the ink over. So I was kind of on a roll. So I'm going in all directions here. There's no rhyme or reason as to how I'm doing it, and I'm not being particularly light at all. I'm certainly not pressing down really heavy, but yeah, it works really well, and I didn't really get any big blotches of ink on there, so I was pretty happy with it. So that is the blue one, and I really like how that one came out too, but it's time to start putting some cards together. So here's the first one that we did, and I'm going to dry it a little bit more because there is a fair bit of ink on there, and I really don't want to kind of get it, smudge it all around on my fingers at this time. And I am going to fussy cut this out. Now, I know some people aren't a fan of fussy cutting, and in general, I would say that I'm not big on it either, and I choose very carefully what I'm going to fussy cut. So I don't mind patterns that are kind of easy, but anything super intricate I will avoid at any cost. And I went along and did the same thing to all 3 panels that I have today, but I'm not going to put you through the pain of watching me fussy cut them all. I do have a big brush marker here, and this is the black one. It is definitely worthwhile to go around all your edges, in particular because I was using watercolor paper and it kind of is a wee bit thicker, just so that it kind of finishes it off nicely. And for this blue one here, I did it in a dark blue color. Now I'm just going to trim off some of the bits where the embossing folder kind of didn't get there. And then I have got this kind of, this is like a royal or a navy blue maybe, sheet of paper. This is just from my stash, and I'm going to make a matting layer for my piece. Here I have some fun foam. Now this is the 2mm fun foam that I will link down below. I will link the embossing folder as well. As I said, it's from the KS Crafts store. And one thing I like doing, again, this is the same pen that I went around the outside of the paper with. I'm going around the outside of the foam so that when people get a glance of the side of the card, the foam kind of blends in a little bit more and doesn't kind of stick out, and the white isn't so stark. So that's a little trick so that you don't have to have every color of foam under the sun. And I'm just using liquid glue to adhere it down onto my panel. So there you can kind of see, you can't really see the foam, which is what I like. And that's the idea of doing it. Then more liquid glue to adhere it down onto my card base. And my card base is a 110 pound Nina Solar white card base. And then I just white heat embossed the sentiment "Happy Birthday to You" on a thin strip of that same blue cardstock. I am backing it with Alina's, from Alina Crafts on AliExpress, her thin foam tape, which I love, and then putting it right down the center of the card. And that kind of finishes off number 1. And I really like this. I really think it's clean, simple, it didn't take very long, and it's easy to reproduce. So here I go with the next one, and this is the plain kind of black one that we did with just on the white background. And this one is going down to a light blue color here. And then once I put it down, I was like, oh, I could add this little strip of silver that was sitting on my desk from the previous cards. So I'm just adding that tiny little strip of silver glitter cardstock, and it just kind of gives it that extra wee bit of something. So from here, I'm going to pop this one down onto a card base as well. And I just have exactly the same sentiment for all 3 of them. And I'm just kind of doing the same thing with the foam tape. It's the skinny foam tape, which happens to fit perfectly on these tiny little strips. So it's really easy to use. And I need lots of birthday cards at the moment, so hence why they are all birthday ones. And then you know me with my enamel dots, I'm going to pop a couple of these light blue ones in the center of the flowers in the embossing folder. And again, it just adds that tiny wee bit of color to the black and white decorative panel on the front. And then last but not least, here is the yellows and oranges and pink one that we did. And I'm putting this down onto a kind of light yellow background, pretty much the same as all of the others. This one I'm going to use some double-sided tape, just because you can use anything. If I use liquid glue, that doesn't necessarily mean that you guys have to use liquid glue. There are definitely always alternatives. So I'm using my double-sided tape for that, and then the foam tape to pop this up. But you could just use the fun foam and glue it on as well if you don't have the tape. And then again with these are the matte enamel dots, and that will finish off this card. I really, really like how easy this technique was to do. You could definitely add the embossing folder to some pre-printed paper as well, or whatever you kind of have in your stash. Have a play around. I hope you enjoyed this video today because I loved creating these cards. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Bye!